chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. And he says, the wisdom that leads to a beautiful life is to trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your path. The wisdom that leads to a straight path, if it penetrates our hearts and our minds, that makes a beautiful life, is to trust in the Lord with all our hearts. To trust here with all our hearts, to trust in the Lord. Heart in the Old Testament means not just the emotions, but the will and the intellect as well. So it's talking about the whole person, to trust in God with everything that you are. Just like sometimes we're tempted to trust in money or power or the government or the president to give us the security and the protection that we seek, Solomon is saying to trust in God in this way instead of other things. To trust in the Lord with all your heart means to not lean on your own understanding. So to trust in the Lord means to not lean on your own understanding. That's why the word lean is used here. The word lean paints this picture of weakness, of foolishness, like when you lean on a broken crutch. It's not smart, it's not wise to trust in our wisdom or anybody else. With the little that we know, that's not a wise thing to do, but it's wise to trust in the Lord. So to trust in the Lord means to not lean on our own understanding. And the way that we do this, Solomon says, the way that we can not trust in ourselves but trust in God more is by acknowledging him. Acknowledging means to know God. It's the word know here is the deepest word for knowing someone, meaning you only can trust God more and trust yourself less if you know God more intimately. So to know somebody, you have to spend time with them. You have to walk with them. It takes time for trust to build, but that's the only way trust builds. When you get to know them really well, you can trust them more and more. So the way to trust ourselves less, not lean on our own understanding or anybody else, and to be able to trust God more, it takes time. It takes knowing him, spending time with him. If you do that, this is the wisdom that leads to a straight path to a beautiful life. And it starts with knowing him, with spending time with him, to trust in God more and to not lean on our own understanding. And I'll end with this story. This is a true story of something that happened at a church. There was this pastor who shared this story on the radio of a member of his church, this lady who was a very godly lady, and she was one of the best members of his church, a very godly woman who served the church faithfully, who loved God, but she wasn't married. And one day, this guy walks into the church, and she immediately falls in love with him. This is the guy that she's been praying for such a long time. She feels like God's finally blessing him with a relationship that she was waiting for. She likes him, he likes her, long story short, and they decide to get married. And they plan the wedding, they invite the guests, everything is good to go. 1 week before the wedding, she goes into her prayer closet like she always does, because she's knowing God, she's spending time with God, she loves God. So she goes into her prayer closet to pray and spend time with God. And in her prayer time, she gets the impression that God is saying to her, do not marry him. 1 week left, all the invitations are out. And every time she goes in to pray, she feels as if God is saying, he's not the right guy, do not marry him. She starts to get confused and upset. She almost doesn't want to pray for 1 week, just until the wedding is over, so she doesn't have to hear from God during her prayer time. But the more that she prays, just days before the wedding, more strongly she feels as if God is saying, do not marry him. She doesn't understand. She's confused. She's upset. But this is the God who has been good to her whole life, who's never failed her, who loves her, and though she doesn't understand, she decides to trust him and not lean on her own understanding. So days before the wedding, she calls all the guests and says, the wedding is off, it's canceled. She calls the guy and says, I know you're not going to understand. I don't really understand, but I can't marry you anymore. So she breaks off the engagement. And she's upset, she's crying, she's bitter at God. As godly as she is, she doesn't understand. She decided to trust God, not lean on her own understanding. And a few weeks later, she found out that this guy was a liar, a fraud. He was HIV positive. And he had not told her, and she was about to enter into this miserable life. But because she trusted in God and she did not lean on her own understanding, her life path remained beautiful. And it is the same for you and for me. This is the wisdom that we get today that leads to a beautiful life. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding, and you will be on the path to a beautiful life.